Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, Arichcomiclife. My blog describes my experiences of watching over 800 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. My name is Richard Gill and my guest today is the incredible comedian Mr. Nick Helm. Yes! Hello mate, how are you?
Hello Richard. I'm all right, how are you?
I'm all right mate, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking.
My absolute pleasure.
Classically, thank you for rescheduling.
Yes, we had to, didn't we? But that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's great.
We're going to do an interview. It's going to be about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's going to be all about your comic career. So I'd like to start off by saying, of course, you are one of my favourite comedians. How did you become a comedian in the first place?
Before I answer that, I would say that you are most comedians' favourite audience member.
Well, you're very kind.
Not mine, but a lot of comedians.
Of course, I was expecting that.
How did I get started as a comedian? I was always very interested in comedy. I think some of my earliest memories are from comedy. I remember my dad. I used to live in London, and then I moved with my family to St Albans, and then I lived in a few other places when I graduated university, and then I moved back to London. I actually don't live very far from where I grew up.
Right.
Now, and I remember when I lived in London, so I must have been very young. I must have been under 8 years old. And I remember my dad used to read to me in bed, and he would fall asleep, and I would climb over him, and I would go. We lived in like a 3-story house, and it was like this very old sort of like I guess it was like a Victorian house, or maybe it was an Edwardian house, but it was like this 3-story house that didn't cost very much then. and now I just look. My parents sold it to move to St Albans, and now you look at it and you just think there's no chance that I'll ever be able to afford a place. Do you know what I mean? It was just like they took it for granted. But I remember I climbed over him, and then I walked down all the stairs, and then I'd sit and watch either Victoria Wood or Jasper Carrot, or French and Saunders or something with my mum, who'd be watching. My mum always used to stay up and watch TV, and my dad used to fall asleep. So I used to watch comedy shows with my dad, and then whenever I went to the video shop, I was born before video shops, so I guess video shops started becoming a big thing in the mid to late 80s, and I'd always rent comedies and stuff. I never thought about being a comedian. It always occurred to me that was something that other people did.
Right.
And me and my sister always used to really love stand-up. We used to love Stuart Lee and Richard Herring. We used to watch the Mary Whitehouse Experience. It was always like a really, that was when our parents' sort of sense of humour, we developed our own sense of humour. And then I was really a big Jack D fan. My sister really liked Eddie Izzard and Joe Brand. So we we grew up with like basically Channel 4 comedians in our house. I never thought about being a comedian. I always used to think, fucking hell. How do they remember that much? How do they remember a whole hour? So I was in bands, and I used to do school plays, and then I wrote theatre, and I wrote plays, and I wrote poetry and music, and I used to, I guess I used to write sketches and stuff like that. And I never thought about it. And then I did university. I started taking stuff up to my. I mean, this is a bit long-winded, but I mean, I guess I never really. Not that I never intended to be a comedian. I never thought it was something that just regular normal people like me. I never thought it was like a thing that just people could do. I don't know who I thought those comedians were, but I didn't think that they were real people, you know, or like normal people. Yeah. So I just never assumed that it was something you could do. So I was writing. I did very well. So two things happened. One was that when I was 16, my drama teacher at school took us. I think if you were sort of, I wasn't like a very popular kid at school, and I wasn't into sports and stuff like that. And I think that if you were into sports, it was kind of, maybe it was a little bit easier because, football was part of the syllabus, and there was like after school activities, and, you know, you kind of like grow up with football and it's passed down to you from your parents, and I never had any of that. So I was a bit lost at school. Right. And then our drama teacher took us to Edinburgh Festival. We did a school play. We did Romeo and Juliet, and we did it in the winter. And then it went all right. And because she was sort of like a drama teacher that was also exploring her own sort of ambitions through drama, one of her ambitions was to, I think she was going up to Edinburgh anyway, and she just thought it would be a good, like, learning, you know, to do her own stuff. And she thought it'd be a good experience for us kids to sort of go to. So there's like, I guess it was everyone between year 9 and sixth form went up for a couple of weeks to do Romeo and Juliet up in Edinburgh, which went fine. But when I got up there, I was just like, I'll this is all I want to do. We were all underage. Yeah. We were all about 16, but we just went to like pubs and watched comedy. I saw Al Murray up there.
Wow.
And I went to see stuff at the Tron, and Al Murray got me up on stage, and I went to see stuff at the Tron, and I really loved the Tron as a venue, and I thought that was great. And I remember the Tron was mentioned in Trainspotting, the book, and so it was kind of like, it was like this thing. So there was that, and then I started writing my own stuff when I was at uni, and I did very well drama in my A levels, and my drama teacher said, you should take that. I wrote a 10-minute play, and they said, you know, you should take that up to Edinburgh. And I was just like, well, what are you meant to do with a 10-minute play? You know, you're not going to, you know. So I wrote another 5 10-minute plays. So rather than expand 10 minutes, I just wrote another 5, because, you know, it's a piece of piss, isn't it, writing a 10-minute play? So do you know what I mean? I don't know what I was thinking, because I spent so long on that 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That I ended up just writing another 5, and I was just like, okay, there you go. That's an hour. And then I just did that. And then I wrote plays, and I spent a long time like writing plays, like 5 years. I took a play up, used to work in pubs, and used to work in admin and do data entry and stuff in the year, and then take up plays and stuff that I'd written throughout the year, and I'd take it up to Edinburgh. And that's how I did it. And then it was just so much work to sort of like, you know, organise a cast and rehearsals, and it was like a tight little group of friends. There's about 4 of us, and it was just a lot of work to sort of like organise. And then people got like lives, and they started like branching off, and then it was me and my friend Rob, and I'd written a play that had taken, I think I'd started writing it when I was about 17, and I ended up getting a version of it together for Edinburgh in 2006, and it got like, so I guess I'd been working on it for about 9 years, on and off, and it got 1 star in the Scotsman.
That's awful.
Yeah, but then they phoned up and they said, well, it was a printing error and it should have been 2. And fair enough.
Wow.
when you go online, it was a 2-star review online, but it was a 1-star in the paper. But we sold out because it was a 1-star review, and everyone turned up convinced it was going to be shit, and we ended up winning. We ended up winning them over a bit, but there were songs in that I'd written quite sincerely that, because they were so sincere, ended up being quite funny. People laughed at them, and rather than get offended, I was just like, sure, maybe that's deliberate.
Yeah.
And then because I'd spent so long on this play and then it got nothing, I was sort of like a little bit lost. I was in my mid-20s. I'd done well at school. I'd done well at uni. And then I was sort of like drifting along, and I didn't really know what to do. And I knew that plays were a lot of work. And I tried, I made a list of all of the things, like write a book, be in a band, like be an astronaut. Honest, I put that, and everything that would take longer than 6 months or whatever, I just crossed off the list.
Yeah.
And one of the last things, or that involved the participation of other people, like being in a band, writing, putting on a play, you need other people to do that.
Yeah.
I wanted to do, and writing a book is just you, but I didn't want to sit in I'd spent 5 years sat in a room writing stuff. I wanted to get out and do stuff. And so I was just like, stand-up comedy. And I honestly, it never occurred to me that it was something that I could do. And I did a 1-day course called Pepperstock in Crouch End.
Right.
And they, taught you how to hold a microphone and told me to tell a story that I wouldn't tell my mum. And that was it. And they said, yeah, you could do that tonight. There's a little group. I don't know if anyone else off that course really went on to do anything.
Yeah.
But and then I did, about 6 months later, I had a gig and I booked my gig in and I did it. And I was just like, oh, right, this is what I want to do. And that is the long ansher to...
It's fine.
But you know what I mean? It's just like...
Yeah, it's great. Other than this blog, the most creative thing I ever did was write a play. I've written a play called The Applicant, which me and my mate performed in 2003 for Comic Relief. We did 3 shows. We got over £2,000, and it's about it's basically about me. It's called The Applicant. It's about a bloke from Carlisle who never gets a job, comes down to London, can't get a job, has a very successful girlfriend who has a job, and by the end of it, he gets his ideal job and he dies. So the last scene is him at the gates of heaven or hell or wherever you believe in, and he's being interviewed by God, and God says to him, we think you're ideal to interview corpses to decide whether or not to send them to heaven or hell. And I shrugged my shoulders after half an hour, and the lights go out. And this went really good. It's based on I got the idea from the film After Hours, the Martin Scorsese film, because
with Griffin Dunn,
he never goes back to work, and so the point is he would never ever get a job no matter how hard he tried, and he kept getting better and better and better. And it was all about monologue, and so the first scene was him in the waiting room. And then he didn't have anybody to talk to, so he started talking to the audience. And I wrote these great monologues to get the story going. And I ran out the first night I did it because he's late for his interview, and I completely forgot the monologue. And I wrote the flaming thing. But it certainly gave me the creativity to do this blog. I never thought it would be as successful as this.
But that sounds brilliant.
Yeah. And I had the idea to take it up to the Edinburgh Fringe. I never did. I want to revise it and do it, So we'll wait and see. But it's amazing how small acorns make bigger things, like with your comedy.
I think non-directly as well, because it's kind of like it wasn't so much doing a school play that made me think I want to do this forever.
Yeah.
But it was going up to Edinburgh and that sort of like nightlife and that environment, and just all of the hot rooms with sweaty comedians and being like elbow to elbow with other audience members and laughing at something and not knowing what you're going into, and that was what really kind of like was sparked my imagination off about what I knew I wanted to go to Edinburgh before I knew I wanted to be a comedian.
Right.
But like my plays were a lot like your play. Yeah. By the sounds of it, mine were all about kind of like death and philosophy and kind of like taking stuff like characters like the Grim Reaper or the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and kind of like making kind of like comedies out of them, and some of them were really dark, and so I think it was just a really good, and also I wrote a lot of material that didn't end up going into anything. Right. That was sort of like good practice for me, so that when I started doing comedy, and when I started doing TV, people would say, you know, have you got any ideas? And you'd be like, yeah, I've got loads of ideas because I've spent 10 years writing ideas down. No, so it was all very lucky.
When you started your comedy journey, were you doing 5-minute spots in pubs with friends? Is that how you gained the experience of the specific comedy straight after your course?
Well, so I did the course, I would say, in about March. Right. I did Edinburgh in August, which was the 1-star play where I just thought, I'm gonna give theatre a rest, not necessarily retire, but like give it a rest. And then, so that was the August, and I think my first gig was something like the September after that August, late September after that August.
So what year is that?
2006. I wanted to do it while I was still 25. And I turned 26 on the 1st of October. Right. So that's that. But then, so my very first gig was at Crouch End, downstairs at the King's Head.
Know it well.
Which is, I think, it's got Peter Graham runs the gig, and he's a lovely guy now. Yeah. But when you don't know him, he's terrifying. And it was like, but there are these hurdles that you've got to jump through before you even tell a joke, you know. And one of them was phone up Peter Graham and ask for a slot. So I phoned up Peter. You know, they said they gave me his number at the course. It wasn't like an extensive course, but it gave me enough confidence to like make a phone call. And the first phone call was, you know, you got a phone in between like 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. So I wasn't working at the time, so I had to set my alarm. And you phone up Peter Graham and you say, can I have a... Oh, what did I say? I said, I was very nervous. And I said, hello, I'd like to book a gig, please. And he just says, well, I'm going to need to know your name. And I was like, fucking hell, I thought we were having a... Do you know what I mean? It's like what are you... Like, what was he? Are you meant to just like start all conversations with, hello, my name's Nick Helm and I'd like to book a gig? It was just kind of like, so I thought it was a conversation, but it was sort of like, God. So I was already ready to hang up and run away and not bother. And I did it. And then, you know, you had to wait like 6 months because there was a waiting list. Whenever it was March to September, and then when I did the gig in September, it went fine. It was like, I think it was like, maybe it was 7 minutes, and it went absolutely fine. There were some jokes in there that I kept forever. Yeah. But the thing that happened after that was the people that ran the gig were there, and one of them said, "Is that so? How many gigs have you done? That must have been like your 5th or 6th gig." And I was just like, 5th or 6th? God. no, it's my first. And they were like, that was very good for your first gig. And I was just like, wow, and look at that. It almost looks like it's my 5th gig. And now I've done like thousands of gigs, and you just think, my 5th gig, I must have still been absolutely appalling. But so there was that. But then also afterwards, somebody said, one of the other acts came up and they said, would you like a gig? And I was like, oh, yes. And so after doing theatre for 6 years, where you do a play, it has a run, the play finishes, and then you have to think of a new idea and then do that. And no one had ever offered me another, no one had ever said, hey, do you want to come and do your play over here? Or do you want to come and do your play over here? And, that's not true. I did get one of my plays on in London, but that was from an old friend who ran a theatre. But like no stranger had ever come up to me and said, we love what you're doing. Yeah. Come and do it over here. And my first ever gig doing stand-up comedy was like, this guy came over and he said, I love what you're doing. Come and do your stuff at my club. And I was just like, wow, I've instantly doubled the amount of gigs I've done and I thought that sort of community and that sort of network of people where you're all like hungry and helping each other, because you can't do like a whole night of comedy by yourself. You need like 4 other acts to do it. You know? And so to have like that group of people and to learn that on the very first gig, I was just like, that's brilliant. And then the gig came along and it was absolute dog shit, and there was only 6 acts in the audience, and then one by one you all get up out of the audience and do your bit and then sit back down again. But it was but I realized after my first gig that I was just like, oh, that's great. I always sort of describe it as I felt lost, and I was writing and I was doing stuff, but I was working. I don't think there was any way I could have just kept writing theatre and doing theatre for the love of doing theatre. And then I could have worked in an office for the rest of the year. Yeah. And I kind of guess I would have been happy to a certain extent. But when I did comedy for the first time, it felt like there was like a missing piece to me. Yeah. And I'd found it, and I was just like, okay, this is what I do.
So there must have been a point where you thought, I'm good at doing this, I can do this well.
I don't know. I don't really think about it like that. I've just got into. This sounds like it's completely unrelated, and it might be.
It's fine.
but I've just got into making picture frames.
Right.
So I buy. I'm basically. I love pictures. I love film posters and film artwork, and I frame them all. And then I was buying some unusually shaped pieces of artwork that I couldn't just buy frames off Amazon. So I thought, I'm spending so much money on picture frames these days. Why don't I just teach myself how to make picture frames? They can't be that hard. So I taught myself how to, I went online and I looked at some videos, and then I bought the equipment and I bought the tool, the stuff, and the materials and stuff like that. And then I started making these picture frames, and I made my first picture frame, and it wasn't very good. And it was sort of like lopsided and uneven. So I broke it at the joints and recut it, and then put it back together again, and then it fit a lot better. And then I took that first attempt and I stuck it on the wall, but I put it in like a shaded area on some stairs, so you can't really see it. But it's my first attempt, and it's up there. And I've sort of like, and so each time, and occasionally you will do like a perfect picture frame.
Right.
And like you'll have measured it just right, and the artwork that you've got just slots right into it, and it's like a perfect fit, and you go, that's amazing. And then the next one will be slightly lopsided again, and you can't notice to the naked eye when it's hung up, but you know that it's not quite right, and that And making picture frames is sort of like, it's not a skill that you improve upon. It's like you have to give each picture frame the same level of concentration and detail as the last. It's not like, after you've learned the basics, it's not like, hey, I can do this in my sleep.
Yeah.
You still have to concentrate every time you do it. And I was teaching my friend, because I put pictures of my picture frames up on Instagram, and my friend Henry, he said, how do you do that? I've got some weird stuff to print. And so yesterday I sat down with Henry and I took him step by step through how to do the picture frame. And I'd never taught anyone how to do it. So it was sort of, I was saying stuff out loud for the first time. And one of the things I was saying was, it's not about aiming for a perfect picture frame.
Yeah.
It's about trying to get each step perfect. And if you get each step perfect, then you'll end up with a perfect picture frame. But you don't want to think of your fine, you've got to cut each piece of wood correctly.
Yeah.
And you've got to cut the glass correctly, and you've got to measure correctly, and you've got to do each stage correctly. And if you do each stage correctly, you should end up with a good picture frame, right? But if you're racing ahead to get to your finished product, you're not giving the process enough concentration, and you can fuck it up. It doesn't matter if it's your 20th or your 100th or anything like that.
That's fascinating, because it reminded me, you've just recently done the Stand Up to Cancer thing where you had to what's the word? You had to get a celebrity
mentor. I had to mentor.
That's what I'm trying to remember. Where you had to mentor a comedian, and watching your process in that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I can see what you're saying with the analogy with the picture frame. I can't.
The point about the picture frame is that you have to enjoy the process.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you're just thinking about getting a perfect picture frame, then you're going to miss out on a lot.
Yeah.
And if you're concentrating on getting each bit of wood to the right length, and you're getting it all perfect, if you're concentrating on getting each stage perfect, then you're kind of like enjoying the process. And I think with comedy, I don't feel like there's ever been a moment where I've mastered it, but I feel like
I disagree, but yeah.
But I feel like it's like picture frames, and sometimes you'll do a gig and you'll go, that was perfect. That gig went as well as it could do. And then, with the material that I've got at this time in my life, at this moment, with this audience, in this venue, this is a perfect picture frame. That's Whereas you can also have like some gigs that you're not as prepared for, or you're tired, or you've had an argument or a breakup, or your audience are too drunk, or do you know what I mean? There's any number of things,
of factors can come into it. Yeah.
And sometimes it will be perfect, and sometimes it won't be. And it's not about judging yourself based on a perfect hit rate. I think it's about appreciating the process and enjoying the process, and learning from, like with picture frames, you're learning from your mistakes. You're going, right. You're feeling your way, and you're like going, all right, I've measured the wrong bit there, I'm doing this wrong. And you're trying to sort of like learn, and you're trying to remember every time that you redo another one from, it's not instinct. You're trying to remember from the last time you did it, what your mistakes were then. And things will be variable, things will change. And with comedy, I think it's very, I don't think it's like about going like, finally, it's true, you are only as good as your last gig, really. And because they're of the moment.
That's the live experience, though, isn't it? When you're in the room, you're of the moment, and that's what makes it magical.
And you last, that gig will last as long as people's memories. and so you kind of have to just sort of I guess that's maybe it's a bit philosophical, but
no, it's a perfectly great analogy of what you try and do, and you've described it really well.
I don't think I've nailed it, but also with the thing with Baroness Saida Varsi,
Yeah.
and teaching her how to do stand up. It's one of those things where I've got to a stage in stand-up where it is the choices that I make on stage are sort of instinctive now, but you do have to try but in teaching someone else and showing someone else, it does remind you that there was a time when it wasn't instinctive and there was a lot of work, and there was a lot of work that went into working out what your voice was and who you were on stage.
Right.
And how long have I been doing stand-up now? 15. Yeah, it'd be 15 years. And and so it's easy to forget that there was a lot of trial and error to get you to that point. So when you're actually teaching someone and their reputation is on the line because they're listening to what you say and they're going to get up on stage and say whatever it is that they're going to say, then you're kind of like you're sort of hyper aware of your process again, which is weird because maybe you haven't even thought about it. Either you haven't thought about it in about 10 years or you haven't thought about it ever, and it's just sort of been like this instinctive process. So to convey it to someone else, that's difficult as well. I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever.
It is a fascinating thing because I went on a half-day writing course to do my blog, and I was invited to go on it, and I was with a load of people who wanted to be reviewers, and when the person came up to me, that she said, oh, we've forgotten why we've invited you. And I said, well, I can tell you I'm not a reviewer, I'm not a diarist, I'm not a reporter, I'm not a critique, I'm a member of the audience, and I'm out to have a good time, and my blog hopefully will enthuse for all these people who actually get up and have a go at doing it. And she never bothered me again. And I thought I must be doing something right. Let's move on to Edinburgh. My holiday every year, I've been going to the Edinburgh Fringe since 2005, and I see about 50 shows in a week that I go there. I'm very lucky to be able to go. You have had many successful shows in Edinburgh over the years, and in 2017 and 2019 you've had two very successful UK tours. I've seen you many times live on stage, including a memorable first encounter, and many more times at Always Be Comedy, and also on tour. How do you get your ideas for your shows, please?
So that's a different question from how do you get your ideas for your material? Yes. Well, my ideas for my shows, I guess, I don't really put a lot of weight into any of that. I think that I like, so what I mean by that is I think that when you hang around with a lot of comedians, when you start out with a lot of comedians, there's a lot of noise and a lot of comedians are saying different things, and everyone's different. Everyone's got their own process, and it's easy to sort of like get swept along and take someone else's process as your own, and be kind of like, oh, that's how to do it, so I'll do it like that, and it might not work for you like that. And I think everyone was always very sort of keen on making sure that they had a really good, their first Edinburgh hour was going to be really good because they wanted to get nominated for their first Edinburgh hour. And I think I'd done Edinburgh, before I did stand-up comedy, I'd done Edinburgh for, I did my first stand-up Edinburgh in 2007, and I did my first Edinburgh in 1997. So I'd been going up to Edinburgh for 10 years before I started doing stand-up.
Yeah.
And I, because I'd come in through theatre and then started doing stand-up, and and I sort of stumbled on something by accident. I guess I didn't really know much about it from a stand-up comedy point of view. So everyone put a lot of emphasis on doing their first hour, and I always just thought, as soon as you do your first hour, you can do your second hour, because I'd already got into the process of going up every year. And I always thought that whatever you get wrong in your first hour, you'll learn from, and then you'll make, new mistakes in your second hour, third hour, fourth hour. So I always just thought that it didn't really matter what your show was about. It had to be about, it just had to be something that was loose enough that you could hang some material off.
Right.
So, for instance, I was meant to be doing when I did my first hour. It was 2009, and I was meant to do a three-hander with two other comedians from Brighton. I lived in London and they lived in Brighton. I was meant to, do a show with them, and they dropped out at the last minute, and I couldn't cancel the slot.
Right.
And I had like one day. It was with the Free Fringe. It was with Peter Buckley Hill and PBH, and I said, "Can I drop out because the other two people I'm doing a show with?" And he said, "No." And I was fucking hell. But I'd already written. If you'd left it to me, I wouldn't have thought I was ready to do an hour.
Right.
And I would have put it off. But because I just didn't think I had that much material. But then, and I was always struggling with 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I think 5 minutes is the hardest. I think 10 minutes is difficult. I had never done an hour. And so I, went on my laptop, and I had all of like these files saved. One of them was missaved. I'd mistitled it, and it was, instead of Bad Things Happen in Threes, which was a bit of material I had, it said Bad Things Happen in Trees. And I said, I need to come up with a title for an Edinburgh show, like in 5 minutes. So I just said, I'll call it Bad Things Happen in Trees. That could be a poetry show.
Yeah.
And so I just put a load of poems and songs and stuff together. And then I went down to Brighton. Angela Barnes did a night down in Brighton called Funny Farm.
Yeah.
And I did my first hour down in Brighton, and it was the easiest thing I'd ever done. Like, getting up and doing an hour was just incredibly easy.
Wow.
I mean, I'm giving you very long answers, so you can see that I can talk. And going on stage and doing an hour was brilliant. Doing 5 minutes was just like, how the fuck am I meant to do 5 minutes? I don't know when, but with an hour you had like, textures, and it was like dark and shade, and you could not be funny for a section of the show, and you could delay punch. Do you know what I mean? It was like you had a lot more freedom with doing an hour, and I loved it. And so then the next year I was like, I'll do another show, and I used to say, keep hold of the gold on stage. and someone said, I think, yes. Someone said, you should just call your show Keep Hold of the Gold. And it hadn't even occurred to me. And I was just like, right, I'll call it Keep Hold of the Gold. And then I just tried to make the show all about kind of like, trying to be positive in the face of negativity. Yeah. I didn't have a passion to tell. I didn't have like a burning passion to write a show about positivity and keeping hold of the gold. I had a title for a show, and then I wrote material to fit the title. And then the next year, I had a girlfriend, and we'd just met, and we went on holiday to New York together. And we went to see the Nutcracker. It was around Christmas time. We went to see the Nutcracker in New York.
Nice, romantic.
And it was very, her parents were there as well. It was, and there was a lot of stuff about dreams in there.
Right.
And then while we were there, we ended up, because it was like the holiday of a lifetime. I'd never had any money to go on holiday.
Yeah.
I was so poor I didn't have any money, or I'd started working and I couldn't take the time off because I needed to work.
Right.
And so this was kind of like this holiday. And so while we were there, we ended up going down to Orlando, and we were in the queue for I can't remember what ride. Oh, it's the Rock and Roller Coaster in Universal Studios.
Brilliant.
And
now we're talking.
and there was a queue, and there was somebody that was wearing a they were in a Led Zeppelin t-shirt, and it was the t-shirt where it was the image of Icarus,
right,
with the wings.
Yeah.
And we'd seen the Nutcracker, and then I'd seen this Led Zeppelin poster, and a friend of mine used to say "Dare to Dream" as just like a catchphrase thing. And I just said, right, I've done a show called Keep Hold of the Gold. And so I said, I'm going to call this show Dare to Dream, and it'll be about dreams, and I'll use elements of the Nutcracker. I mean, this sounds wanky, but it was literally it was like in this holiday that I had around Christmas, there was about 5 things that all sort of slotted together. And then the poster was sort of like me with Icarus wings, and it was meant to be like the Led Zeppelin poster. The title was Dare to Dream. I did the blurb, and then all of the material had to be about dreams, because it has to be about something. You've got to write. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't have like this burning desire to write an hour about dreams. I just did and then I did a show called This Means War, which was kind of like I always saw that my shows were like a storyline. So Keep Hold of the Gold was me with relationship issues, and then Dare to Dream was me with father issues, and This Means War was me and my girlfriend, and now we're going through a breakup. And then I did a show called One Man Megamyth. Literally, that was the year I did first series of Live at the Electric. I did the pilot for Heavy Entertainment. I was about to do the pilot for Uncle. I've done an hour on Radio 1. I was the first comedian to do Radio 1 since Chris Morris.
Wow.
And I'd done all of these things, and I was like, well, I'm not going to do Edinburgh this year. And somebody said, you have to do Edinburgh. And I did an old show in 2007 that involved an Evel Knievel costume. So I literally had a title, which was One Man Megamyth, and I combined the title that I had floating around with the Evel Knievel costume. And then I had to put together the concept for that show in like hours. And then I had to write the show. But I always think that it doesn't really matter what your show is about, because you're going to write another show. So, or I just think about, what's the concept for this show? What are we selling this time? Well, we've done dreams, we've done war, we've done gold, and now this time we're doing Evel Knievel, and what it is to be, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a man.
Yeah.
And then this last show, Phoenix from the Flames, that was a show that I really had to get off my chest. That was really important to me. And either I've turned the corner, and that's how I write shows now. I have to sort of like bleed for them, or that was sort of like just something I had to get out of my system.
It's interesting, because the two that particularly come to mind for me as the hour-long shows were your Masterwork show in 2017, which was just a fantastic number of ideas, an incredible amount of ideas that you put into the 1 hour. And then my favourite encounter with you was I was determined to come and see Phoenix from the Flames in 2019, because I couldn't get in to the Edinburgh Fringe. And the nearest place to me, which I'd never been to and have nothing against, was Aldershot. And I spent, it must have been 3 hours walking around Aldershot in the rain with nothing to do. And there you were outside Wetherspoons, amazed that I'd come on to see you, and the show was so tightly knit when I went in. It was perfect because you took a very not difficult subject, but very daring, I suppose, subject, and you tried to open it up to the masses, and it worked brilliantly because it was a mixture of how I believe you felt and wanted to get your points across, as well as with the comedy. You had various elements in there, and I absolutely loved it. I easily think it's one of the best things you've done, and I was so pleased to see it streamed because it deserved to be looked at the masses. And then afterwards, after that night, seeing you in the Weatherspoons, I couldn't believe that, and we had a conversation like this. It was a terrific night, so thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Well, what I'd say about that was that, just to clarify, I was staying at the Weatherspoons. It was a hotel as well.
Yes.
So all of my stuff was there.
Yeah.
Right. All of my stuff was there. But also, as I was leaving the Weatherspoons to go to the gig, I bumped into you in the street.
That's right.
And I had to ask you directions on how to get to the venue.
Yeah, that was. I thought this is going to be great because I'd only been there for 2 hours. Thankfully, it was just up the road.
But that gig was great, and the tour was great, and I'm really I think that is like the perfect balance.
Yes, yeah.
Of having something to say.
Yeah.
But also being aware that it is a comedy show.
Yeah.
And I kind of it's all trial and error, and you can have in your head what you want a show to be like, and when you finish it, you're kind of like, well, I didn't mean like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Or this bit's not very funny, or whatever. But with that show, I thought it was like and I might do shows differently in the future or whatever. Yeah. But for this specific show, I thought it was a perfect sort of like balance for me of talking about something that's very important and serious to me, but also being hyper aware that it is a bit of stand-up comedy and making it funny and accessible to an audience. And I thought the mixture, I think sometimes it's easy to forget that it's meant to be funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Or that this is the serious bit and now this is the funny bit. And I think to make I don't know if I'd ever be able to do it again, but I think that the show did very well.
But you made that seamless, you see. You didn't, that it did not come across as this bit serious, this bit isn't. You had your points to say, which you got across brilliantly, and they were intertwined with the stand-up comedy. It was great. It was really great.
I mean, I'm very hard on myself. If I do something that's not good or that I'm not happy with, I'm very hard on myself. And if you're going to be hard on yourself, then you have to sort of acknowledge the good stuff.
Yeah.
And I do think that the balance between serious, I didn't feel like there was kind of like huge gear changes. Yeah. I felt like it was an enjoyable show that sort of crept up on you. And I was really proud of that. Yeah.
What I also love about your shows is that I think you're a brilliant rock musician and regularly perform with your band and part of your tours. I've got your CD here. Nick Helm there's a plug. Can anybody see that? Nick Helm is fucking amazing, highly recommended, and Hot and Heavy are both brilliant CDs. Do you prefer writing music to stand-up comedy?
It's like, they're totally different.
Right.
And I find writing music very difficult at the moment.
Right.
But sometimes you'll have an idea for a song and you can like write it in 5 minutes, and sometimes you'll have an idea for a song. I've got demos that I'm re-listening to from maybe 5-6 years ago that I still haven't finished, where you kind of go, well, what if it was a bit like, and when you're writing an album, it's kind of like, if the song isn't finished and everything else is waiting for it, then you swap it out and you put something else in its place. And then, so I've got rollover songs that have not made it into, oh God, like the previous few. what's the song on this one? Keep on fucking trucking from Phoenix from the Flames.
Yeah.
That was originally. I didn't have a closing song for Phoenix from the Flames. This is an exclusive because I've just remembered it.
Thank you very much.
I didn't have a closing song for Phoenix from the Flames.
Right.
And I was giving someone some advice, and I said to them, well, you just got to keep on fucking trucking. And then I thought, that's the title for a song.
Yes, of course.
And so I wrote that down, and then I wrote the lyrics that were fairly quick, and I sort of had the tune in my head, but I didn't have enough time to put together to put together a demo. I didn't have enough time to go to my recording studio, my friend's recording studio down in Deptford, who I work with, the producer Andy, who did all the music from Uncle, Andy Jones, and I didn't have enough time to put a demo together with him so that I had a track that I could take up to Edinburgh, to all this other stuff. And then I remember that in 2012, I'd written a song called My Purple Heart, which was for the show This Means War. And all of the songs had to be like war analogies, but also about romance and stuff. And so I had a song called Purple Heart, and it just wasn't a very good, it was an all right song, but it was a little bit of, it just, the audience had to do a bit too much work.
Right.
So I never used it, but I had a really good demo of it. So I just took the vocals off the demo, and the new song that I wrote fit on that backing track. And so that was like a rollover song that I never used. That when I did Phoenix from the Flames, I'd written this song for Phoenix from the Flames that and out of necessity, I needed to use some music that I already had, and it all fit perfectly. And now it's kind of like, I forgot that Keep on Fucking Trucking started off as a totally different song. So I love writing songs. I love sitting in a recording studio and sitting with Andy. I'm like a backseat driver, and Andy will be producing, and I'll say, "Oh, make that a bit louder and put some more claps in here," and you know, and when you're completely satisfied and finished and happy with the song, you know, and you're happy, then you release it to the general public, and they can like it, they can not like it, but it doesn't really matter. It's obviously matters on some level, but the bottom line is that you've got it the way that you want it to be, without, it's a very pure artistic expression, because it's like, this is what I want it to be. It's perfect. And now it's yours, right? Now it's the audience's. Whereas with comedy, it's 100% inspired and contorted, and you know, it's like a conversation, you know, where a song will be written. There's verses, there's mid-lates, there's bridges, there's choruses. You know, there's like a format. You know, there's a structure to writing a song. Whereas, and you can sit down, you can do that, and when you've got all the words and they rhyme and they're all not always, but and it's all there in a row, then you write the music for it and then you do it, right? But with comedy, I'll go up on stage with no notes or a couple of notes, and I'll talk in front of the audience for 20 minutes, and some of it will work and some of it won't work. And the stuff that works, I'll try and remember for next time, and I'll write down as a note, like I write bin bags, and I'll do 10 minutes on bin bags, but it'll never have been like written out. And you only know it's going to be funny if the audience say it's funny.
Yeah.
And if the audience don't find it funny, you just don't do it again. It's not really personal. It's just kind of like, it's just kind of like, I've got an idea for something that I think is funny. You try it, it doesn't work, then you try something else. But with songs, it's kind of like they're totally different. It's kind of like songs are very, very personal. You want people to laugh. You can change lyrics and stuff, but you've got complete control over a song. Whereas comedy is more like collaborative.
Sure, yeah. You've also appeared on TV and radio many times, including the successful sitcom Uncle that you mentioned before, and also The Reluctant Landlord for Sky, and also Loaded, which I loved you in. I thought you were brilliant in for Channel 4. Again, describe the differences in your approach to acting as opposed to stand-up comedy. There'll be two different things again, are they?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I started off wanting to act.
Yeah.
When I was at school, and I was terrible at auditions, and I've got a very bad memory for lines, song lyrics. Ridiculously, I can't remember hardly any lyrics from songs that I've written. So, it's very stressful. I mean, I find that the most stressful thing about getting up on stage is remembering lyrics to stuff. And so I always wanted to act, but I was terrible at auditions and I was terrible at remembering stuff. So that's when I started writing. And I thought, if I can write myself stuff, then I don't have to audition. And all three of those projects are just, it's weird. All three of those projects were incredibly different from each other. Uncle was like very, very lucky to get Uncle. Uncle was a series of good fortunes and coincidences that led to me being offered the main part in that. Excuse me, I'm just drinking Pepsi Max Cherry. So what happened with Uncle was in 2012, I did a show called, 2011, I did a show called Dare to Dream, and Henry Normal, who was one of the co-founders of Baby Cow, which is Steve Coogan's production company, and Henry Normal wrote, The Royal Family with Caroline Aherne, and he's basically a living legend. But he started off as a poet, and I do a lot of poetry. And he came to see Dare to Dream. He sat on the front row, and I remembered him from all of like the DVD extras on all of Steve Coogan's DVDs. And at the time, I'm not sure how many people were aware of what Henry Normal looked like.
Yeah, exactly.
And I knew what he looked like, and he was sat on the fucking front row. And I came, and he liked it. And then Channel 4 said, you could offered me these blaps, which are like 5-minute online things. Yeah. And they said, who do you want to work with? And I said, I'd like to work with Baby Cow because it's Steve Coogan's my hero. Yeah. One of my heroes. And I love like everything that they do basically at the time. This is back in 2012, 2011. And I'd just grown up watching Steve Coogan, and I was just like, I'd like to work with Baby Cow. So I did the blaps with Baby Cow with Channel 4, and then Baby Cow got a script in for a pilot, and they sent it to me, and I read it, and I liked it. And I went in for a meeting with Henry Normal and Ollie Refson, who wrote it. Yeah. And they said, do you two get on with it? Do you two like each other? And we were sat next to each other. And I was like, yeah. And we went out and we had a little talk about tone. So we had a little talk, me and Ollie. We had a little, because the script was good, but it's just kind of like you could take that script and you can make an Adam Sandler comedy out of it, or you could take that script and you can make sort of a Royal Tenenbaums out of it. Yes, yeah. And I just was like, well, what's the tone? and we started talking about Royal Tenenbaums and Wes Anderson and Harold and Maude and stuff like that. And I was just like, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm interested in. Nothing against Adam Sandler comedies, but a lot of them are awful. So, but do you know what I mean? It was just kind of like I wanted it to have like the balance between sweet, dramatic, life affirming stuff and being funny. And it could have just been really crude and broad and there's a time and a place for that, but this was a special project and I was just like, I want to make sure, and we agreed on everything. And so Henry just said, there you go, you got the part. And I did it for Channel 4. Channel 4 turned it down as a series, and then Shane Allen, who was head of Channel 4 comedy, moved over to BBC. And he took Uncle with it, and then we did it on BBC, and it was great. It was like a family. I was there for right from the beginning. I think it had been around for a bit, and I think that I was one of the reasons it got made, because I was hot shit at the time. And
you were superb in it. It was such a wonderful performance that you gave.
Well, it was sort of like I'd done some student films, and I just remembered that I'd acted so big in them that they were just awful. So I just tried to do as little as possible, and just remember that there's a camera it
seemed to work.
The camera's doing most of the work for you. So you just sort of like, and Daisy was really kind of like encouraging on the first project that we did, and so and when we quickly all became like a very tight little family. I obviously love Elliot, and we got on very well. And that was that. Whereas Loaded was something that was away from my TV family, where I felt by the third series of Uncle, I just felt very relaxed, and I felt like I belonged there. And I knew what my role on set was. Obviously I knew what my character was, but I also knew that my role on set, Ollie's very sort of shy and retiring, and he's just concentrating on directing and getting the script. And so I would sort of like, I remember I did a pilot I don't think it ever got aired, with Tom Davis, and he was just really great with all of the crew and all of the other cast, and he learned everyone's names and went around, and it was a real pleasure to be around. I was in his project. And I learned a lot from just watching how he was with the crew. And then when we did the third series, I felt really at home. Whereas with Loaded, I had to audition for that. And it was a long audition process. Everybody wanted to be in Loaded at the time. All of the actors of a certain age all wanted to be in it. And all of the comedians were going up for parts, and I had to audition for that. And that was very stressful, but also I felt very proud to have got that part, because I had to work for it. Henry gave me the part because he saw something in me, and then after that I had to get the part for Loaded. And so then there was that, and then with The Reluctant Landlord, that was totally different again. Whereas Uncle happened fairly, once the gears were in motion, that happened fairly quickly. Loaded took a while because of all of the auditions. And then with Reluctant Landlord, I was in the edit I did a short film called The Killing Machine about boxing. And I was literally in the edit for that. We were doing the color grade on that, and I got a phone call from Ramesh, and he said, please say you'll do it. And I was just like, do what? And then I looked at my messages, and I had all these messages, and they had the guy that was playing my part, Lemon, had dropped out like 2 days before they were going to film, and they didn't have a part for it. And I hadn't even read the script. I didn't even know my character was called Lemon. Ramesh just said, will you do it? And I was just like, I'm in the middle of something. So they sent a car. I think that I signed the contract and everything like that. This happened like Thursday night. I signed the contract. Or maybe Thursday they asked me. Friday I was finished the grade on my film that I'd made. I got in a car, drove to Shepperton, or I think it was Shepperton. They did a costume fitting. I met all of the cast and the crew. We did like a photo shoot, and then on the Monday we started filming. And
Wow.
and
What a turnaround.
they were like, "Have you got any questions?" So I was like, "Yeah, what's my character called?" You know, it was like. But Ramesh asked me to do it, and I was just like, absolutely, absolutely. But so those three projects were just like completely different from each other. Again, I struggle with lines and stuff like that. But I had a really nice time on it. I'd like to do more acting. Really.
I think you should, because you're very good at doing it. And I'm so with you with Steve Coogan. He's one of my heroes as well. I went to see him. I went to see his show, The Man Who Thinks He's It. For a birthday present for my brother, and we went on press night, and it was when the royal family was just coming onto BBC One.
Right.
And we both saying, "Have you seen this? It's like any family. It's like mum and dad in Carlisle." And as we walked in to the bar, there was Ricky Tomlinson, and we just went, "Oh, hello, we think you're the funniest thing on television." And he said, "Well, Caroline's over here, and this little timid thing sitting in the corner, God bless her." And we went up and she said hello, and it was just amazing. And then Steve Coogan, his characterization was just superb.
I think the Man Who Thinks He's It. I mean, I've grew up watching Jack D, and you know, so there are other stand-up comedians, but I think The Man Who Thinks He's It is probably the most influential comedy show I've ever seen. I just think it's one of the best comedy shows. It's the best comedy show I've ever.
It's well done. Yeah.
That VHS copy of it that I had, I sort of I watched it till it didn't work anymore.
And all the comedians you said at the start, I've seen all of them live as well. I've got so many memories, and of course that's why the blog works. It's been such a joy talking to you. We've ran over the hour, unfortunately, but is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? Are you doing any more writing? Have you got any gigs coming up? Where can people find you on social media?
We're just beginning to look at gigs again. I've got an album that's 3/4 finished that I just need to finish off. I've got I Think You Stink soundtrack album that I need to finish off. There's like loads of stuff, but I don't know. I'm writing. I'm playing it by ear. We will see. Yes.
Well, I for one am going to be in the front of the queue coming to see you live again very soon, because you're one of the funniest comedians I've ever seen. You've made me laugh so much over the years, and I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, and B, thank you for all your support and writing your blog. And I think that, you know, comedians can't exist without people to watch and laugh at us. And I think that, you're doing a really good job. I think it's a really good job of keeping an archive of all of the acts that are performing, not just now, but within your lifetime. I think it's great. So thank you for doing that.
All the best, my friend. It's been a delight. You take care, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you very much.
All the best.